So at a glance, this idea of delivering a power pack, while pretty straightforward, can be very complex. And that's what this visual shows us, is that this notion of teaching kids different things at different times with different intensity, using different strategies, can be quite complex. And when we try to look at it at a glance, we can almost sense that complexity of what it takes to make decisions around who needs to learn what and so forth. So while we're trying to build and post information about every single one of the quadrants here, whether it be at tier 1, what is universal, what is at tier 2 that is targeted, what is at tier 3 that is individualized. So we're trying to figure out what to teach at tier 1, what to teach at tier 2, what to teach at tier 3. Right now we're going to focus on the how to teach, which transcends all 3 of the tiers, but we'll do a quick overview. So the sequence itself, whether you're at tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, goes as following. We got to figure out who needs to learn what. So we have to figure out what to teach. And this means that all children are triangles, all children have varying needs, and all children will have intensive needs at any given time. We also want to think about, when is it good to teach? This is not only from what is our daily schedule and when does it lend itself to be taught, but when are children ready for the content to be delivered? When are the adults or peers in the room or in the playground or in the community? When are we able to deliver the instruction with fidelity? We also want to think about where are there multiple and varied opportunities for us to teach children, not maybe in always the most obvious of places, but how do we turn these teachable moments into something that really supports the individual learner, as well as small groups of learners and whole groups of learners. We also have explored what we teach with. How do our materials, how do our toys, how do our things that are in the environment support what it is we're teaching? They might be fun, they might be interesting, they might promote engagement, but how did we specifically identify different toys, materials, and objects to support children's learning and to create additional and multiple learning opportunities? And that brings us to the 5th step, which is how to teach. This is a really complicated diagram as well, and you look at it and you're not quite sure what to orient to. The first thing is to orient yourself to the y-axis on the left, and then as well on the right. And then there is the horizontal axis between that goes from low to high. So notice it goes from low to high on the left, low to high on the right, and low to high on the bottom. The 2 on the right, the scale, if you will, is a low probability to a high probability. Again, a low probability to a high probability. Across the bottom, it's the amount of adult mediation. Sometimes I talk about this being the amount of adult effort, but sometimes people put a lot of effort into preparing the environment, to getting the materials that we need and so forth, but that's a little bit different than what I mean in terms of amount of effort. This is how difficult is the strategy. If it's something you do automatically, accidentally, maybe incidentally, with ease, it's over here on the low. When it's something that has a more prescripted, scripted, sequenced, a right way, a specific way, that starts to get over here to the high end of things, high adult mediation. It requires a lot of the adult to deliver the strategy with fidelity. So the way this grid works, if you will, is if you want a low probability of the child initiating. So let's say it's not what you want. You don't want the kid to be the initiator. You want the kid to be the responder, or the opposite, which is you want the child to be able to produce a very specific behavior that the adult has selected and initiated. See how those are at odds with each other in terms of a continuum. Low child initiated, the opposite of that would be high demonstration of an adult specific and adult initiated skill. Conversely, if you are interested in a high child-initiated behavior, the opposite of that is selecting a skill that is selected again by the adult and is initiated by the adult. So when you want something that is a low probability of child-initiated, but yet a high probability of the child producing a specific behavior, that helps you know where on the continuum. So in that instance, if you want low child initiated and high child producing of the adult selected and initiated skill, you're going to have to pick strategies that require a higher degree of adult mediation. Conversely, if what you're interested in is the child initiated behavior, the kid starts it, the kid begins it, the kid is the one leading the learning, and you're not so in love with or interested in something that you as the adult have selected, then in that instance you would use these strategies that require a lower amount of adult mediation. But in general, we talk about sort of 3 tiers of instruction. Now, are there really strategies at each tier? Some people would profess there are. We believe that there are strategies that can be used across any of the tiers. It's the way in which we deliver it. So the way in which it is characterized, our intention, our effort, our mediation dictates really what tier we're at. Why does it matter? The only reason it matters is that we believe there's a one-to-one correspondence. If I have as a child a tier 1 type of outcome, a common outcome that everyone should be learning when they are my age of 4, I'm doing just fine. I just need practice, exposure, and repeated opportunities to learn. Then my instruction should match that. My instruction should be things that can be delivered to any kids, to all kids, that address these universal needs, that are a constant part of the daily routine. They're just part of the flow. So the idea is that these strategies lend themselves to just supporting children, allowing children to become stronger, allowing children to use their skills across settings, time, and people, giving kids multiple and varied practice opportunities. It's really this exposure. When I deliver a strategy, whatever it is, and it's in these characteristics, I'm addressing tier 1 outcomes, which are these common outcomes. So the universal strategies, these tier 1 strategies that are pretty low adult mediated, pretty part of the, or should be part of the flow, the constant chatter, the automatic nature of the classroom, are things like universal design for learning, environmental arrangement, and then just thinking specifically about how we interact with children. Are we allowing children choice? Are they engaged? Are they inquiring about things? Are we using some specific strategies that are really pretty open-ended, like brainstorming and self-talk? And do we give some very logical consequences or feedback that let children know that they are doing what we expect, or they are having success as we would anticipate in terms of our descriptive praise and natural consequences? So this notion of a tier 1 strategy is sort of funny. It's really rather strategies that are useful when we want tier 1 type of instruction to be delivered. Same thing at tier 2. There's not really tier 2 strategies. Again, some might say there are, but really it's what the characteristics, how they're delivered. So the strategies we would pick to use when there's a tier 2 outcome, a targeted need, this would say to us, it's for some children. It's a smaller group of children, a subset of children, those that are struggling or whose development has stalled. It's also temporary, so it's not something that we do constantly, automatically as part of the flow. And so our attempt is to jumpstart, to help this child who is struggling or whose development has stalled with a little bit more focusing, a little bit more laser precision, if you will. We don't just kind of let it go anywhere on all things to anyone. We're a little bit more focused. We're going to come in with a little more intentionality, a little more frequency, and it's going to be specific to these targeted needs of a subgroup of children. And so how we start to think of how we arrange small groups, how we organized children, how we utilize peers that might be in the classroom who already have the skills that we are desiring from another group of children, and really how do we scaffold, how do we make sure that whatever prompting strategies we might use are really the right one, the least intensive that the child might need, or just the right amount of support given where they are in terms of their development. And then that brings us to kids that have these very individualized needs, very intensive needs. This is where we get much more personalized, much more individualized. And this really needs to be intensive. So it does become part of the flow, but it is embedded into the flow. It is very purposefully, mindfully, consciously, intentionally embedded into, a part of. It is part of the flow, but it had to be incorporated into it. It's not just what is automatic for all children. So our aims are really to teach things that a child is missing, something that is foundational, something that is the pro-social replacement behavior. It is a very specific outcome that is very unique to that child and where they are in their development and learning. It is also something that's not going to just happen accidentally or with a few attempts. It's really going to need frequent dosages, whether those are spaced, distributed, or masked. We really are thinking about many dosages, and the child needs very, very specific feedback that is tied directly to their actions immediately following whatever it is that they might do. So the things that we might pull from might have their traditions in a more special ed history or research base or literature, but they are things that we know that any young child may benefit from. And these might be very specific things like milieu teaching strategies that can get into other types of language strategies in terms of expansions and expatiations. There might also be different response prompting procedures where we have this notion of how much guidance, how the prompting, is it from least to most or most to least? It might also get into our time delay, whether it be simultaneous, progressive, constant time delay. These are very specific strategies that have very specific steps that we need to do with fidelity in order to address very individualized and foundational skills. So when we pull it all together, the how to teach is the last part of our sequence, whether it's at tier 1, at tier 2, or tier 3. We're really thinking about, okay, I know what I'm teaching, when I'm teaching, where I'm teaching, what to teach, how to teach, and that one single sequence is what we are calling a power pack.